She walked into my life at 11:07 p.m., and everything changed. It was the kind of night that clung to your bones, not just because of the cold, but because of the silence that wrapped itself around the airport terminal like a forgotten coat. Gate 42 was deserted, except for the soft glow of vending machines and the dim overhead lights casting yellow halos across the floor. I sat there, 58 years old and far too familiar with the ache of loneliness, flipping absent-mindedly through a crossword puzzle that had long stopped being a challenge and had become more of a ritual, a distraction. My name is Alexandra Ward. I fix airplanes. Not metaphorically, actual planes. I've been a mechanic for 37 years, most of them in overalls stained with oil and grease, living between hangars and humming engines that understood me more than people ever had. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm: work, go home, feed the cat and repeat. A safe, predictable life, until she walked in. The soft sound of boots on tile made me glance up. I wasn't expecting company, but there she was, a woman with the kind of presence that rearranged the atmosphere. She had rich chestnut hair pulled into a lazy ponytail, smudges of something dark on her cheek that suggested work, grit, or fire. She looked tired but alive. Her eyes, though deep green, alert, kind, carried a spark I hadn't seen in a long time. She didn't ask if the seat was taken. She just gestured to the puzzle book I held and asked, "Mind if I help with that?" I blinked, startled by her directness, her confidence. Then I nodded, nudging the book toward the empty chair beside me. "Be my guest," I said, already curious. She dropped into the seat with a tired sigh and the kind of ease you only have when you've stopped trying to impress anyone. "Lauren Lopez," she offered, sticking out her hand. Her grip was strong and warm, the kind of handshake that told you she worked with her body, not behind a desk. "Alexandra," I replied. "Alex." She grinned. "I don't do nicknames, I like Alexandra, it fits you." That was the first moment. The first flash. A stranger seeing me not just as a tired woman waiting out a storm, but as someone worth noticing. I hadn't felt that in years. The wind howled outside, a winter storm grounding every flight out of the airport for the next several hours. And inside that fluorescent-lit gate, two women who had no business knowing each other began a conversation that would change both their lives. She told me she was a firefighter. Not the kind that works in sleepy suburbs. She worked offshore, on oil rigs, in places most people had never heard of. She ran into infernos with calm precision and called it just part of the job. I listened, captivated, as she described the thrill of controlling something so wild, so destructive, and for the first time in a long while I found myself sharing things I usually kept locked away. The feeling of crawling inside an engine and understanding what it needed without words. The satisfaction of turning broken machinery into something that could fly again. It wasn't about work. It was about purpose. And suddenly, I realized we weren't so different. 4 hours passed like nothing. We finished 3 crosswords. We laughed, really laughed, not polite chuckles, but genuine, belly-deep laughter that made my chest ache in the best way. She smelled faintly of smoke and lavender, a contradiction that matched everything else about her. And every time our shoulders brushed, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't dared feel in decades. She was too young for me, too bold, too alive, and yet I couldn't stop looking at her. At 3:30 a.m., when most of the airport had gone silent and the lights dimmed for overnight cleaning, she leaned in closer and whispered, "You ever feel like you've been holding your breath your whole life?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and the truth settled between us like a shared secret. Before we parted, she asked for my number, not like a pickup line, not in some forced flirtation. She wrote it down in the crossword puzzle margins next to a clue that read connection between two people. Her answer, chemistry. And somehow it fit. I didn't expect her to call. Women like her, women who glow from the inside out, who walk into rooms and leave ripples in their wake, don't usually call women like me. Older, settled, safe, but 3 days later, while I was elbow-deep in a stubborn Cessna engine that refused to cooperate, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up my screen. Lauren Lopez. I stared at it for a solid minute before I picked up. "Still solving puzzles?" she asked, voice soft and teasing. "Only the mechanical kind." "Then let me buy you coffee, or dinner, or whatever we call this thing we're doing." That was the second moment. The one where I said yes, not just to her, but to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't over yet. We met at a tiny cafe on the pier, with chipped tables and the smell of salt air mixed with espresso. She was already there, leaning back in her chair with a confidence I envied. She smiled when she saw me, and I swear, it felt like the sun came out. The conversation picked up where we'd left off, flowing easily between stories and questions and long, thoughtful silences. She listened like it mattered, like I mattered. And when she reached across the table to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. By the time we stepped out onto the boardwalk, the sky had turned a soft watercolor pink, and the waves crashed gently against the rocks below. We stood by the railing, watching the sea, saying nothing, until she broke the silence. "Alexandra," she said quietly, "I don't usually do this. Ask women out, I mean." My heart beat faster. "But there's something about you that makes me want to take chances." I turned toward her fully, the wind whipping through my hair, and then I said something I never thought I'd say out loud. "Maybe it's time I started taking chances, too." She kissed me then, soft, hesitant, like asking a question, and I answered by kissing her back. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a spark that lit up all the parts of me I thought had gone dark. I hadn't been touched like that, hadn't been seen like that in years. My ex-husband had been kind in a distant, distracted way. But Lauren, she saw me. Every line, every scar, every quiet ache. And she kissed them all like they were sacred. Over the next week, we didn't fall in love, we ran into it. Like it was a burning building we were both desperate to enter. She showed up at my hangar with Thai takeout and a crooked grin that made my knees weak. She asked to see my work, touch the edge of a rusted engine with the reverence of someone touching art. I handed her a wrench. She got grease on her hands, and I fell a little more. One night, while the sky outside turned a deep violet, and the hangar lights cast long shadows on the walls, she asked the question I'd been afraid of. "Have you ever been with a woman?" I looked at her, really looked, and I told the truth. "No, but I've thought about it, wondered." Her gaze softened. "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me." She stepped closer. "Then we'll go slow, unless you don't want to." "What if I don't want to go slow?" Her smile turned into something dangerous and beautiful all at once. And that night, in the quiet of my small kitchen, we kissed again. Only this time it wasn't soft. It was fire meeting fire. And neither of us backed away. She pressed me gently against the counter, her hands careful but sure. I'd never felt so nervous, or so alive. When she whispered my name, Alexandra, it didn't sound like a name. It sounded like a promise. We didn't rush, we explored, with reverence, with patience, with awe, and in the pale light that crept through the curtains afterward, as we lay tangled in sheets and shadows, I realized something powerful. I wasn't broken. I wasn't too old. I wasn't too late. I was just beginning. But neither of us knew that by sunrise, everything we'd built would be threatened in ways we couldn't imagine. That my past, or someone else's mistaken version of it, would come crashing into our fragile new beginning. That love, real love, was about to be tested. Because sometimes, right when you discover what makes life worth living, the world tries to take it from you. And that's where our real story begins. They put me in handcuffs at sunrise, but she didn't blink. The morning started like any other. I was up before the sun, sipping black coffee that had gone cold while I tightened bolts on the Cessna's right wing. The hangar was quiet except for the low hum of a space heater in the corner and the occasional creak of metal settling into place. My phone buzzed once, a text from Lauren that simply said, "You left your scarf. I'll bring it later, and coffee, obviously." A smile pulled at the edge of my lips. She always added the word obviously to things that had become our ritual. Coffee, smiles, long conversations. Kisses that started with laughter and ended in breathless stillness. I hadn't known I could feel this kind of steady joy, not loud or dramatic, just the quiet comfort of being chosen, again and again, by someone who saw me as I was. That was before I stepped outside for some fresh air and saw 3 police cruisers idling outside the hangar gate. I knew something was wrong even before I heard the crunch of heavy boots approaching across the gravel. Officers don't show up at sunrise without reason. I stood still, wrench still in my hand, as 2 men and a woman in uniform came toward me. The oldest among them held up a photo on his phone, grainy, black and white. It showed a woman of my build, my height, with shoulder-length hair, caught mid-motion pointing something that looked like a weapon toward a bank teller. "Alexandra Ward," he asked. His tone was firm, rehearsed. "Yes. We need you to come with us." "What's this about?" He didn't answer right away, just nodded toward the photo. "Witness identified you from this surveillance image. Incident occurred yesterday at Riverside First National Bank. Armed robbery." The words didn't make sense. They sounded like lines from a movie I wasn't cast in. "That's not me. I was here all day working. I didn't even leave the hangar." "We'll sort that out at the station," he said flatly, as the female officer stepped forward and took the wrench from my hand. I didn't resist. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there as she turned me around and fastened cold steel around my wrists. The cuffs clicked tight, not painfully, but with a finality that sucked the air from my lungs. The weight of humiliation hit me before the fear. I wasn't a criminal, I was a mechanic. A woman who paid her taxes, returned her library books, called her mother once a week even though they barely had anything to say. Yet now I stood in the middle of my own property, arms bound behind my back, with neighbors beginning to peer from across the street. Watching, judging. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable roar of Lauren's pickup. She must have seen the cruisers from the main road, because she pulled into the lot with tires squealing, throwing the door open before the engine even stopped. "Alexandra," her voice cracked through the air like a whip. She looked at the scene, me in cuffs, the officers surrounding me, and her expression shifted in a blink. Fear, then disbelief, then something harder, firefighter mode, the version of her that ran into burning buildings that didn't back down from danger. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Ma'am, please step back," one officer warned, raising a hand. Lauren's eyes locked on mine, trying to make sense of it. "What happened?" "They think I robbed a bank," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "Yesterday afternoon," the officer added. "A witness saw her leaving the scene. This is standard procedure." Lauren's eyebrows shot up. "That's not possible. She was with me. We were together the entire afternoon. I dropped her off after sundown. She couldn't have been anywhere near that place." The officer gave her a skeptical look. "We'll verify all that. Right now, she's coming in for questioning." They began leading me toward the cruiser. I glanced back at Lauren. The woman who just last night had fallen asleep beside me with her hand on my chest, and her head resting against my shoulder like we had always belonged that way. "Don't do anything stupid," I whispered to her as they opened the door. But Lauren Lopez has never been one to stand on the sidelines when someone she loves is in danger. As they loaded me into the back seat, she was already moving not toward the officers, but around the back of the building. I knew that look. She was planning something. Her training kicked in, assessing exits, calculating risks, ready to fight fire with fire. Inside the cruiser, I heard the officers murmuring to each other, procedural, mechanical, uninterested in the gravity of what they were doing. To them, I was a suspect. Another potential threat in a city full of them, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about Lauren. And then, before they even pulled away from the hangar, chaos erupted. The back door to the hangar burst open and Lauren stepped out, waving frantically. "Alexandra, run!" she shouted. The officers shouted. I moved. Instinct overrode logic. I threw my shoulder against the car door, found it hadn't been fully latched yet, and shoved it open. One hand still cuffed, I ran. I didn't look back. Just ran toward the open hangar and the woman waiting for me. Lauren grabbed my free hand the second I reached her and pulled me toward the other side of the building where her truck waited. "Get in," she said. "This is crazy," I shouted. "Sometimes crazy is the only thing that makes sense," she snapped, yanking the door open. I barely got in before the engine roared to life. We peeled out of the lot just as one of the cruisers skidded around to follow us. Gravel spat up behind the tires, and Lauren took a hard right onto a service road I didn't even know existed. "They're going to catch us," I said, panting. "No," she replied with absolute certainty. "I know this area better than they do. Hold on." For the next 20 minutes, we weaved through roads barely wide enough for a truck, paths that once led to oil fields now long dried up. By the time the sirens faded behind us, My chest ached from adrenaline and disbelief. Lauren didn't speak until we were deep into the desert, the radio off, the sky beginning to change from gray to gold. "You didn't do it," she said quietly. "I don't need to ask, I know." I turned to look at her, heart still hammering in my chest. "Why are you doing this? You could lose your job, your license, everything." She glanced at me with fire in her eyes. "Because people in love do reckless things, because this is bigger than fear. You're not a criminal, and I'm not going to let the world paint you as one." I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, because in that moment she wasn't just saving me, she was choosing me, fully, loudly, at great cost. No one had ever done that for me. We pulled off the road and parked behind a rusted-out oil derrick, surrounded by nothing but dry brush and open sky. A place forgotten by the world, perfect for two women trying to disappear. "I used to work this field," Lauren said as we stepped out of the truck. "No one comes here anymore. We're safe for now." Safe, what a strange word. I didn't feel safe. I felt like I was still free-falling, waiting to hit the ground. But then she took my hand. Steady, warm, certain. "We're going to figure this out," she said. "We'll find proof. There must be something, a camera, a timestamp, a clue." I nodded, though the weight of the world sat heavy on my shoulders. "Until then," she added, "we hide, we plan, and we stay together." Together, the word echoed in the stillness. That night, in a roadside motel that smelled of mildew and old carpet, we lay on a creaky bed with a single lamp glowing like a lighthouse in a sea of uncertainty. She held me while I cried, not from fear of the law, but from the realization that this was what love looked like. Messy, risky, brave. She whispered stories from her firefighting days, soft and low, as if to lull me back into belief that we'd survive this. And somehow, I believed her. Because even with the world hunting us, even with a future that had crumbled overnight, I'd never felt more seen, more cherished, more alive. And that was only the beginning. She held me while the world fell apart. The hours after our escape felt like a dream stitched together by fear and adrenaline, threaded with something far more fragile, love. The kind that doesn't come with flowers or candlelit dinners, but with hands that shake as they grip the steering wheel of a dusty pickup truck, and eyes that scan the road every few seconds for flashing lights. We didn't talk much. The silence between us was thick with the weight of everything unsaid, yet somehow still sacred. I sat in the passenger seat, one wrist still red from the handcuffs, the other clenched tightly in my lap as the desert unfolded before us. I wasn't just running from the law. I was running from a world that had never believed I could be anything but ordinary, a quiet woman, a mechanic, a divorcee, a nobody. But next to Lauren, even as we drove deeper into uncertainty, I felt like someone worth chasing. Someone worth rescuing. The motel we stopped at looked like a leftover dream from the 70s, pale blue paint peeling off the walls, a neon vacancy sign flickering like a heartbeat. We paid in cash. 1 room, 2 beds. But when the door closed behind us, we didn't speak. We simply collapsed, not in defeat, but in exhaustion. She sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through her hair, her jaw clenched in that way I'd come to recognize as her thinking face. I sat across from her, legs crossed, knees trembling, the soft hum of the room's ancient air conditioner buzzing in my ears. "I know this feels like the end of everything," she finally said, her voice low, "but it's not. I promise you, Alexandra, we're going to find the truth. I'll burn down the system myself if I have to." Her words weren't poetic. They weren't gentle, but they were exactly what I needed, raw, fierce, and real. I nodded, tears threatening to spill over. And then, without a word, she crossed the space between us and wrapped her arms around me. I folded into her like a wave crashing into shore. The room smelled of rust and regret and something softer, maybe hope. We stayed that way for what felt like hours, bodies pressed close, not for pleasure but for safety, for grounding, for the reminder that even in chaos we were still here, still choosing each other. Eventually, she pulled away, brushing a strand of hair from my face, her thumb trailing down my cheek with quiet reverence. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered, not because it was easy, but because it was true. Lauren opened her laptop and started digging through news archives, public bank footage, every article related to the robbery. Her fingers moved quickly, her expression focused. I watched her from the bed, a woman who once ran into fire now racing against time to save me from a different kind of flame. Hours passed, punctuated only by the low hum of the vending machine outside and the occasional pop of static from the TV. At some point, she found the surveillance footage with a timestamp. 3:47 p.m., the exact moment the robbery occurred. "I remember that time," I said, sitting up. I was trying to fix a seized bolt on the Cherokee's landing gear. I cursed loud enough to scare the pigeons off the hangar roof. She smiled, a brief flicker of warmth. "That's not proof, Alex. I work alone, there's no one to verify it. No camera in the hangar, no time card, just me." Lauren's fingers flew across the keyboard again. "Then we'll find someone who can verify it. Someone who knows your routine. Someone who was nearby." "What if we can't?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What if we're stuck like this, hiding in motels, living in fear?" Lauren closed the laptop, her expression unreadable. Then she moved to kneel in front of me, taking my hands in hers. "Then we face it together, no matter what." There was silence between us again, not the heavy kind, but the kind that feels like breath before a kiss. And then she kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't born from panic. It was grounding, like an anchor tossed into a stormy sea. Her lips against mine reminded me that even if the world turned its back on us, even if justice failed, we had each other. Later, wrapped in thin motel sheets and each other, we whispered in the dark, about our lives before this, the people who had failed us, the versions of ourselves we had shed. "I spent 23 years in a marriage where I was never truly seen," I confessed. "He was kind, but he never asked who I really was, not once." Lauren's fingers traced idle patterns on my back. "I always felt like I had to prove myself. As a woman in the fire service, you're constantly expected to be twice as good to be seen as half as competent. I spent so long trying to be invincible, I forgot what it felt like to be held." "You don't have to prove anything to me," I murmured. "Not ever." She kissed my shoulder. "You make me want to be vulnerable, that's terrifying." "That's love." We fell asleep like that, two fugitives in a cheap motel room with nothing but each other and the distant hum of highway traffic. But for the first time since the handcuffs closed around my wrists, I felt peace. The next morning, we headed out at dawn, hoping the desert roads would keep our secrets a little longer. We stopped for gas in a town that barely had a name. The attendant barely glanced up until he looked at the small TV behind the counter. My face, Lauren's face, side by side. "Armed and dangerous," the scrolling headline read. My stomach dropped. The man's hand moved toward something under the counter, maybe a phone, maybe a silent alarm. Without missing a beat, Lauren stepped forward. "Sir," she said in her firefighter voice, steady, commanding, believable. "We're emergency services. There's been a gas leak reported 2 miles east. You need to evacuate immediately. Don't turn on any electronics." The man blinked, confused. "Gas." "Natural gas," she nodded. "Highly flammable, do you have a car?" He didn't hesitate, he bolted out the door. We grabbed water, food, and slipped out moments later, back on the road, hearts pounding. "You just impersonated emergency services," I said, half laughing, half horrified. She grinned, "Add it to the list." By noon, we reached an abandoned drilling site Lauren remembered from a past job. Dusty, dry, forgotten by the world. We parked the truck behind a rusting oil rig and set up camp, 2 sleeping bags, a few granola bars, and a growing sense of desperation. Lauren called someone named Marcus, an old firefighter buddy turned detective. She trusted him. He promised to dig. That night, we sat on a concrete slab, watching the stars blink into life across a sky so vast it made me dizzy. "This place feels like the end of the world," I whispered. "It's where we begin again," she replied. I turned to her, heart full of ache and wonder. What if we never go back? What if we just disappear? She didn't answer right away, just took my hand, kissed my knuckles. "If disappearing means I get to love you freely, maybe it's not such a bad thing." We lay down under the stars, side by side, our fingers interlaced. "I used to think I was too old for new beginnings," I said softly. "But you've made me believe in second chances." She turned to face me, eyes glowing with reflected starlight. "Alexandra, this isn't your second chance. This is your first real one. That night, under the endless sky, we didn't make love out of panic or fear. We did it because for the first time in our lives, we were free, not from the law, not from society, but from the versions of ourselves we used to be. And even though the world had labeled us fugitives, I had never felt more innocent, more whole, more home. But morning was coming, and with it, a truth neither of us were ready to face. I told her to leave me, but she chose to stay. The morning sun poured into the cracked window of the abandoned field station like truth sneaking into a lie, its golden beams slicing through the dust particles suspended in still air. I woke up before Lauren. Her arm was draped over my waist, her breath warm and steady against the back of my neck. For a moment, I let myself imagine we were somewhere else. Not fugitives, not framed. Just two women waking up slowly in their shared home, maybe a little house by the sea, or a quiet cabin nestled in trees. But fantasy doesn't feed you. It doesn't clear your name or pay for gas or keep you out of prison. Reality surged back as soon as I sat up and checked the phone we'd kept on airplane mode for safety. Missed calls, headlines, a new video clip playing on a news site. I clicked it. There we were, captured by a security camera at a gas station 2 towns over. A blurry shot but clear enough. Lauren pulling me by the hand toward the truck. The voiceover used the words armed, dangerous, unhinged. They painted a story not based on truth but on what the world was comfortable believing. A middle-aged woman with nothing to lose, possibly mentally unstable, seduced by a younger woman and now spiraling into a Bonnie and Clyde-style fugitive run. It made me sick. Not just because it was wrong, but because it was easy. Easy for the world to reduce me to a stereotype, a desperate, older woman clinging to someone younger. Easy to erase Lauren's strength, her choice, her agency. Easy to twist our love into a scandal. I shut the phone off and set it down carefully, like it might explode. Lauren stirred behind me. Bad news, she asked, her voice still husky with sleep. They released a video of us, I replied. They're twisting everything, you should leave. Her head rose slowly from the pillow. What did you say? You should leave, I repeated, forcing the words out like glass shards. Let them believe I manipulated you, that I forced you to run. You can still go back, say you were scared, say you didn't know what you were doing, you could walk away. Lauren sat up fully, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before, not anger, but a kind of sadness deeper than fury. You really think I'd leave you to clean this up alone? I think you deserve better than this, I whispered. Better than hiding in abandoned buildings and dodging helicopters. She reached for her shirt and began pulling it on, her movements controlled but tight. Don't you dare tell me what I deserve. I chose this. I chose you, not by accident, not because I was manipulated, because you are the bravest damn woman I've ever met, and I am not leaving you. I looked away, blinking hard. I'm not brave. You ran from 3 armed cops with 1 cuff still on your wrist and didn't flinch, she said. You're brave, and stubborn, and honest, and beautiful. And if you say one more word about pushing me away for my sake, I swear I'll kiss you so hard you forget what you were even talking about. A tear slid down my cheek, unwanted, uncontrollable. They'll crucify you for this. Let them, she said, pulling me into her arms. I'd rather be crucified with you than celebrated without you. The next few hours were spent in silence, but not the cold kind, the focused kind. Lauren's contact, Marcus, finally got back to her. There had been another robbery in Vegas that morning. Same method, same disguise, same build and blonde wig. And this time, DNA left behind. A strand of hair enough to pull a match from the system. It wasn't me. The real suspect was a woman with a long rap sheet. Fraud, theft, disguises. She served time before and vanished 6 months earlier on parole. Marcus was working on getting a copy of the full file. He promised if we turned ourselves in, he'd make sure the new evidence was reviewed quickly. But quickly, in legal time, meant weeks. Maybe months. I can't go to prison, Lauren, I said quietly, staring out at the dry scrubland. I can't be locked away in a cage for a crime I didn't commit. I'll die in there. Lauren reached over and took my hand. Then we don't wait, we make a move. Like what? We go to the press, find a reporter with guts, someone who believes in justice, we tell them everything. The footage, the alibi, the other robbery, the relationship, all of it. I stared at her. You want to out yourself on national TV. I want to clear your name. I want the truth, even if it costs me. So we did it. We found a small, independent journalist in a nearby city, a queer woman with a reputation for fighting for the voiceless. Her name was Eva. She agreed to meet us in a public park, under the condition that we wore hats, sunglasses, and didn't bring weapons. We laughed at the last part, as if either of us knew how to fire a gun. The interview was raw, painful, honest. I told my story, my work, my routine, my quiet life, my innocence. Lauren told hers, the moment she saw the injustice unfolding, the decision she made in a split second, the woman she refused to leave behind. Eva asked us why we were willing to go public. Because this is what love looks like, I answered. It's messy, it's terrifying, it's wild, but it's real, and it deserves to be told. The video went viral overnight. Not because we were beautiful, not because of scandal, but because we were true. 2 women, 2 lives, 1 love. People shared it across platforms with captions like, "This is what loyalty looks like." Proof that love doesn't have an age limit. The system failed them, we won't. Comments poured in, people offering legal help, shelter, donations, support. Even celebrities reposted it. Lauren paced in our hideout, pacing like the walls were closing in. I sat in the corner, holding my phone, watching the views climb. I think we just changed the story, I said quietly. She looked at me with wide eyes. You did. That night she curled into me on the creaky motel mattress and whispered, "You saved me, before this, long before this. I was just going through the motions. Fire, sleep, repeat. But then you walked into that gate with your crossword puzzle and your quiet sadness and you made me feel alive." I kissed her forehead. You brought me back to life. We held each other until the fear faded, until the weight lifted just enough for us to fall asleep. Tomorrow we would walk back into the fire, but tonight we were still free. And more importantly, we were together. The courtroom was silent until she took my hand. The media storm came like a tidal wave, unrelenting, loud, unpredictable. What started as whispers on obscure forums and queer news blogs quickly exploded across national headlines. Our faces, once strangers to the world, were suddenly everywhere. On television screens, in grocery stores, in push notifications on phones, plastered across opinion columns debating whether we were heroes or fools, fugitives or freedom fighters. The photo Eva used for her article was simple, unedited, raw. Lauren and me sitting in a park, my hand in hers, my face lined with worry, hers lit with defiance. The headline underneath read, "This is what love looks like, and the system got it wrong." It wasn't just the truth that spread, it was the humanity of it, and that, more than anything, began to shift the tide. But public support doesn't erase warrants, doesn't undo protocols, doesn't soften the cold machinery of justice. Within 72 hours of Eva's article going viral, we got a call from Marcus, his voice lower than usual, strained with urgency. "The DA's office has no choice now. They're offering a deal, but it's not perfect," he said. "They'll drop the charges against Alexandra completely. No record, no trial, but Lauren, they want you to answer for aiding an escape." I remember gripping the burner phone so tightly that my knuckles went white, my jaw locked. My heart broke in the way that only love can shatter it, clean, deep, and irreversible. "They're still coming for her," I said, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "They have to," Marcus replied. "You broke out of police custody. Someone has to take the fall." "I will," I said without hesitation. She was trying to protect me. "No," Lauren said calmly, taking the phone from my hand. "I knew what I was doing. I'm not ashamed of it." "Lauren's." She turned to me, brushing her thumb along my cheek, her gaze firm. "This ends with me walking in with you, not leaving you behind. If I have to stand trial to prove we did this the right way, then so be it. We face it together." There was no more running after that. We turned ourselves in quietly, without fanfare, without tears. It was surreal, walking into the courthouse side by side, the same place that wanted to brand us as criminals now echoing with whispers of recognition. News crews waited outside. Protesters held signs, some in support, some accusing us of attention-seeking, others simply confused by the idea that two women in love could become national symbols overnight. But we didn't speak to them. We didn't wave. We kept our heads high and our hands locked tight. Inside, the courtroom was stark, cold, and indifferent to our love story. It smelled of old wood and harsh bleach, the silence broken only by the occasional tapping of a reporter's laptop or the soft creak of a leather shoe on tile. Lauren sat beside me at the defense table, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. I could feel her heart beating through her hand, could feel the weight of everything unspoken resting between our shoulders. She de-risked everything for me, and now she stood in the crosshairs of the law not as a firefighter, not as a hero, but as an accused felon. The prosecution laid out the facts with surgical detachment: footage of our escape, Lauren's history, my supposed criminal resemblance, the fact that she had impeded a lawful arrest. They made it sound simple, clean, clinical, but truth rarely is. When it was our turn to speak, the room shifted. Lauren stood slowly, like she was carrying something sacred in her chest, and for the first time her voice trembled. I didn't break her out because I'm reckless. I didn't run because I'm scared of authority. I ran because I know who Alexandra is. I've seen her work a rusted engine with gentleness most people reserve for children. I've watched her cry when a plane she restored finally took off. I've held her as she whispered the truth about years of being invisible in her own life. And when I saw her in handcuffs for something she didn't do, every instinct I've ever trained kicked in. You don't leave someone behind in a fire, you get them out, even if it costs you everything. The room was dead silent. Even the judge looked down for a moment, visibly moved, and then, slowly, I stood beside her. I wasn't called to speak, but I spoke anyway. This woman saved me, I said, my voice thick. Not from prison, from silence, from loneliness, from a lifetime of believing that passion, truth, and love were things reserved for younger people, for braver people. She showed me that courage doesn't always look like a badge or a title. It can look like a hand on your back saying, I'm with you. So if you want to punish someone, punish me too, because I followed her. Willingly, gratefully. I reached for her hand and held it tightly in mine. The courtroom remained frozen, the tension suspended like breath held underwater. And then, miraculously, the judge spoke. In my years on the bench, I've seen many things: cruelty, betrayal, greed, but rarely have I seen such a raw act of loyalty, however misguided it may have been. The system failed Ms. Ward. And Ms. Lopez, though your actions were illegal, they were driven not by malice but love and urgency. I'm sentencing you to probation and 200 hours of community service. No jail time. I sobbed right there in court, not because we were entirely free, but because we weren't destroyed, not torn apart. And in that moment, Lauren turned to me and whispered, we just won our life back. What followed wasn't a fairy tale, but something deeper, something more real. We started rebuilding not just our reputations, but our rhythms. The hangar reopened within 2 months. My regular clients returned, some with casseroles, others with cautious smiles, many with apologies they didn't quite know how to say. Word spread quickly in the aviation community. Pilots whispered about the lesbian mechanics who took on the system. Reporters wanted interviews. I declined every one of them. But I did hang a photo on the hangar wall, the one Eva took of us in the park. Beside it, I placed a plaque that read, "Never underestimate what love will survive." Lauren returned to work too, but on her terms. She no longer suited up for oil fires. Instead, she trained new recruits, ran drills, spoke at conferences about women in emergency response. Her voice, once quiet in rooms of men, now echoed across auditoriums. And on quiet days, when no one else was around, she helped me restore old planes. Her hands no longer doused flames, they brought rusted engines back to life. We moved in together, into a small house with wide windows and a porch that caught the evening sun just right. We painted the kitchen together. We burned the first loaf of bread we tried to bake again. We argued over where to put the bookshelf. We danced barefoot to old jazz records at midnight. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being free. About being seen. One morning, as we sat drinking coffee on the porch, she slid a small box across the table. My heart skipped. Inside was a simple platinum band. She didn't get down on one knee, she didn't make a speech. She just said, "I want to grow old with you." I stared at her for a long time before I answered. You already are. We laughed until we cried. And then I said yes. She put her name beside mine, and the world finally stood still. 6 months after the courtroom doors closed behind us and our freedom was stamped with probation and quiet sympathy, the world still hadn't fully settled, but we had. Our lives weren't perfect, they were better. They were real. We rebuilt not just what was taken from us, but what we had always quietly longed for, not the kind of life measured in headlines or judged by strangers behind screens. No. We built the kind of life that unfolded in a shared glance across a breakfast table, in the rhythm of two people working in harmony beneath the same roof, breathing the same air, choosing each other again and again. The hangar became a place of healing. Ward and Lopez Aviation wasn't just a clever name, it was a declaration. I had painted the new sign myself, one quiet Sunday morning, while Lauren held the ladder steady and teased me about the brush strokes. Her smile that day, it was the kind of thing you wanted to bottle and keep forever. Our customers started coming back, not just for the engines, but for the story. We became the couple who beat the system, the women who ran, kissed, and won. Pilots asked for Lauren by name. Teen girls toured our workshop as part of outreach programs, wide-eyed and curious, asking us what it meant to be brave. And brave we were, but not in the dramatic, fiery way people like to romanticize. Our bravery was quieter, waking up and showing up, apologizing when fear made us sharp, holding each other through grief, not just joy, setting healthy boundaries with the media when they tried to turn us into symbols instead of human beings, learning to breathe again after trauma, learning to kiss slowly again, without urgency, because we were no longer racing against time. We got married on a Tuesday. There was no white gown, no rented hall, no aisle to walk down, just us, two grease-streaked mechanics standing beside the same old workbench where Lauren had first kissed me months before. Marcus officiated, wearing a fire department t-shirt and his crooked badge. There were no guests, just tools, sunlight, and love. I wore my best khakis. Lauren wore the denim jacket she'd worn the day we met. We exchanged the simplest rings we could find, silver bands without diamonds, smooth and unpolished, like us. Do you promise, Marcus said, to keep choosing each other even when the bolts strip, the engine floods, and nothing makes sense? I do, I said, laughing through tears. So do I, Lauren whispered, slipping the ring onto my finger with a grease-stained thumb and a smile that melted something deep inside my chest. The kiss we shared wasn't cinematic, it was better, it was slow, intentional, earned. Afterward, we went right back to work. The oil filter on the Cessna needed replacing, and a client was flying in that Friday. Marriage didn't stop life, it just made it more worth living. The next few months passed like pages in a book we never wanted to finish. We baked bread that still came out lopsided. We slow danced to Ella Fitzgerald on stormy nights. We argued about paint colors. We rescued a stray cat that now ruled the hangar with an iron paw. Every Sunday, Lauren insisted we take a damn break, and we'd drive to the coast, park by the cliffs, and sit on the hood of her truck, sipping gas station coffee and watching the waves. One afternoon, while the sky bloomed in orange and lavender, she leaned her head against my shoulder and said, "You know, I used to think falling in love after 50 was a fairy tale. Now I think it's a revolution." I kissed her temple and whispered, "Then let's keep revolting." But healing, as we learned, isn't a straight line. There were still nightmares, still sudden surges of panic when a stranger stared too long or when an unexpected knock came at the door. There were days when I couldn't stop reliving the moment those handcuffs clicked, the feel of gravel beneath my knees. There were moments when Lauren would suddenly go quiet and retreat to the back of the hangar, hands trembling, eyes glassy, remembering a life spent running into danger before she ever ran into love. And through it all we stayed. Not perfectly, but fully. Because staying, that's the real miracle. Love that endures the quiet, the mundane, the unspeakable. Then came the call we weren't expecting. A scholarship foundation, run by one of the jurors from our trial. She wanted to create a vocational program for queer youth interested in aviation and mechanics. She wanted us to lead it. "I've been following your story," she said. "The world needs more people like you, especially the kids who think they'll never be seen." Lauren and I sat in stunned silence after that call. "We're going to teach," I said finally, still processing. We're going to change lives, Lauren replied, eyes shining, the way you changed mine. We launched the program that summer. It was small, just 5 students in the first cohort, all queer, all undersupported, all brilliant. One of them, Elijah, was non-binary, barely spoke the first few days but lit up like wildfire the moment Lauren showed them how to use a torque wrench. Another, Maya, had been kicked out of her house for coming out as gay. She told me on the second week, "I didn't think people like you existed." I smiled and handed her the safety goggles. People like me exist more than you know. We just stay hidden until it's safe. It became more than a program. It became a mission. To prove that life doesn't end at 50. That love isn't restricted by gender or time. That second chances aren't just for fiction. That sometimes, the woman who fixes engines with precision and wears grief in her smile is also the one who sets your whole soul on fire. And on the 1-year anniversary of the day we met, Lauren surprised me. Not with roses, not with jewelry, but with paperwork. She'd officially filed to change her last name. To Ward Lopez, she said, biting her lip nervously, "It's just a name, but it's ours." I held the documents in my hand, overwhelmed, heart wide open. She added, "I want the world to know I don't just love you, I belong to you." I didn't speak, I just kissed her. Kissed her with every version of myself I had ever hidden. The terrified divorcee. The closeted woman who always wondered. The mechanic who once believed no one would ever call her beautiful. I kissed her like someone who had found home in fire, in flight, in freedom. That night we danced in the hangar again, just us, the cat watching judgmentally, and the low hum of old jazz playing from a cracked speaker. And as the stars flickered to life outside, Lauren whispered in my ear, "You were always worth the risk." And I whispered back, "You were always worth the wait."